Hello and a very warm welcome to you all. It's lovely to see you here, and I hope this little talk might inspire some creativity for you, or at least add to your interest in the subjects of musical theatre and the golden ratio. Alternatively, this presentation will give you a well-earned break away from the normality of everyday life, and you get to spend it with me in the mysterious world that I've been stuck in for the last 7 years. I've split up this seminar into 6 key sections. Primarily, I'll demonstrate the aesthetic mathematical concept of the golden ratio as a catalyst for construction in musical theatre production. Now, I say construction as opposed to music composition because that's the key to understanding the results. I'm not looking at the single art form of music composition in the musicals, for example, how Bernstein wrote the score to West Side Story. But, as I will demonstrate, I'm looking at the micro detail that influences all aspects of a musical, such as the plot, special effects, choreography, scene changes, and music composition, all of which contribute to its destiny and longevity at the box office and beyond. The second part of the research demonstrates how to use what I call the Marley System, a process of creation designed from the findings of this research. It can be used to analyse or inform constructions, or adapt new and existing works to conform to the golden ratio design based on duration. Firstly, we will look at what the golden ratio is and why it is relevant. Then comes the technical side, where I will demonstrate how I translated it as an identifier and then a utilisation tool. Thirdly, we take a breather with the science and look at what was discovered through the research and how we can translate this into the practice of writing a full-scale musical. Penultimately, I present the results and how these were utilised to create the Marley System, the golden ratio mapping device that enables anyone to have a go, try it for yourself, and maybe you could write the next big smash hit musical. Finally, we will see the effects of the system on the musical The Green Door, written especially for this research project by myself and colleague Jane Robertson. The final results are not found on paper, not found in the measurements of a statue, nor in the architecture of a pyramid or pentagon, as is most representations of the golden ratio, but in real time, held together by the pre-designed pulse and beats of music, a living, breathing golden ratio artifact. I first came across the golden ratio as a composition tool in about 1990 at a lecture given by Dr. Robin Hartwell, a music lecturer at Liverpool University. He demonstrated a mathematical system that might, and I emphasize might, have been utilised by a handful of early 20th century contemporary composers such as Debussy, Bartók and Satie, whose Gymnopédie No. 1 you are listening to right now. This mathematical concept of composition I found fascinating, but these were examples that were associated with contemporary and in some cases semi-tonal genres. Now, being a lover of music like ABBA and Lloyd Webber, as well as the classics, I wondered whether anyone had tried using the system to create a melodic structure within a pop song. I was so inspired by Robin's lecture that I rushed back to my shabby student accommodation and tried out a calculation on the ABBA song Money, 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 and discovered that I had no money. But there was a loose formulaic connection in the structure of the song. What I didn't realise at the time was the seed had been planted for a PhD study. It did, however, take me 30 years to get started and answer the question, can the golden ratio be used as an influencing factor within the compositional structure of sung-through musicals? Now, why sung-through musicals? Well, these are pieces where the pulse does not stop. Music keeps playing, and any dialogue outside of song is brief. And as you'll see, it's all in the timing and placement of crucial elements. And because this genre has a measured duration, you can, just like static items such as paintings or architecture, do the mathematics as accurately as the golden ratio will allow. For those who are not interested in mathematics, you're in the wrong research seminar. But you're probably so excited about what's coming, you're wondering, what is the golden ratio? The artistic and rather romantic view, simply put, is it's a moment in design that influences the aesthetic beauty of an artifact or natural occurrence, a system of hidden order and connection between things. Now, the mathematical explanation is actually quite simple, but can become very complicated. So for now, we'll stick with the simple for my sake. In this very elegant diagram, we see a box with a spiral in it. Segment A plus B, down the bottom there, is longer than the segment A, up the top. At the same time, the segment A is longer than B. If the ratio of the length of A to that of B is the same as the ratio of A plus B to A, then the line has been cut in extreme and mean proportion, the golden ratio. And you find that ratio by dividing the line's total length by 1.6180339887498948484820, etc. The number is an irrational number, a number that never ends. So the longer that number, the closer you are to the golden ratio. However, most of us just settle for 1.61803. So what? Why bother with a little mathematical ratio? What is important about it? Why the fuss? Many musicologists, art historians, and mathematicians will agree, why the fuss? It's not a magical, mysterious number from the vaults of the Da Vinci Code. Or is it? Creatives have utilized the ratio to formulate art. In music such as the piece you were just listening to, Satie allegedly does something unique, different, or ingenious at the golden ratio point. In this case, he changes the theme of the piece. The golden ratio point in his case was worked out by counting the number of bars in the piece, dividing that by 1.61803, and then making something happen different at that exact piece. Likewise, artists would use the ratio to construct the makeup of a painting. Where is the most important point on the canvas they want the viewer to look at? The golden ratio point. So the focal point of the painting might appear at that point. Now, the fascination that creatives have had in this ratio over thousands of years clearly shows that it is worthy of some sort of contemporary documentation, where age-old theories are put to a modern-day practical test. And this is where the genre of musical theatre comes into play, and with this research. The ratio has long been associated with nature, and more specifically, the aesthetic pleasing aspects of nature. Flowers, plants, trees, the human body, our planetary solar system all share a connection between the golden ratio, and that connection is a correlation between proportions and dimensions of design. If you're interested in why, then just Google the golden ratio, and it will keep you up most of the night and a year. This research is not about what the golden ratio is, but more about how we can use it. Should we use it? And most interestingly, has it been used before, specific to the world of through composed musicals? You can see in the Mona Lisa and the Vitruvian Man and the Last Supper the proportional mapping dictated, allegedly by the golden ratio, along with the architecture of Notre Dame Cathedral and Stradivarius violins. Now I say allegedly because there are few actual documents that relate to the artifact demonstrating a use of the golden ratio. Analysts have found the ratio in front of them, but the proof is not so evident amongst the ancient classics. Before going off into the realms of musical theatre, I want to highlight the writings of Cook and Hambridge, whose early 20th century research in design principles of the golden ratio attempted to connect aesthetic principles to the mathematics. Theodore Cook believed an artist's brain was more in tune with nature than with humankind, and it's that connection that makes some artistic creations more creative. Cook claims the artist does not copy what is in front of them, they create based on what they've seen. Now, J. Hambridge, around 1921, developed the principles of dynamic symmetry, which he states should not be thought of as an easy shortcut to artistic expression via mathematics. The actual process of studying and understanding the working of a natural design law opens up a whole new world of new ideas and frees the mind for real creation. The understanding of a process is enough to allow an artist to take confidence in his own ability, and the underlying law or system, in our case the golden ratio, is enough to act as a catalyst for the work of art. Without reason, art becomes chaotic. In music, without a cage to contain our ideas, sometimes the form is lost and becomes simply rubbish. But a cage that allows a musician to be creative within a structure that we as humans are associated with can only benefit the enjoyment factor. Hambridge summarized by stating instinct and feeling, our creativeness, must be directed by knowledge and judgment, a form, and again in this case the form of the golden ratio. Scientific studies on the golden ratio conclude that it is likely, and just likely, that your brain is hardwired, that it prefers nature and artwork that follow the golden ratio. It makes reasonable sense to assume that the closer you are to the golden ratio pattern in your artistic creation, the more it might be enjoyed by a spectator. So on that philosophical bombshell, let's bring into the equation Jesus. In 1972, we witnessed the start of the musical theatre revolution, and Jesus Christ Superstar by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice was the first. The first what? Well, it was the first commercial musical to be sung through composed, much like an opera, where the music doesn't stop. The concept was invented by Lloyd Webber, and for the first time in this genre, the music dictated the pulse and duration of the piece. Over the next 20-odd years, composers such as Lloyd Webber, Claude Michel Schoenberg, and Benny and Bjorn from ABBA would churn out many more monster musicals, eventually coined mega musicals, primarily because of the cost of producing such an experience. Of course, the ones you know about are the ones that succeeded at the box office. For example, Evita, Cats, Les Mis, Miss Saigon, Starlight Express, Sunset Boulevard, Martin Guerre, Phantom of the Opera, and so on and so on. The new superstar genre had been adopted, which became, and still is, the most profitable live theatrical event in the world, and a model from which through composed musicals still build on. So, for the ones that failed, a very expensive mistake. And that is something this research is trying to help avoid in the future. Each musical is different. They have their own form, feeling and style. So getting it right and persuading an audience it is worthy of their hard-earned cash is essential. There is no magic formula that you can copy because each story is different. Each tune and lyric is written from the heart and means something specific to that musical. But what if there is a common element that binds a musical together and allows and encourages the writers the freedom to create their own form within a cage of restriction? And this is where the golden ratio comes into our story. Can you write an entire musical based on some sort of golden ratio form similar to how Debussy, Bartók and Satie allegedly did in the early 20th century, but on a much larger scale? So I tested that philosophy through a practice-led process. The concept to develop a system that would help composers create their musicals based on the form of the golden ratio. Take it or leave it, at your peril or success. The first stage was to analyze the multitude of sung-through musicals since Jesus Christ Superstar, that being the first, and identify commercial productions that had exact recordings and scores available to me for analysis. I wanted to examine what happened at the golden ratio points and see if there was any common ground amongst them. I was looking for a plot change, a character death, an introduction to a subplot, key changes, tempo changes, costume changes, dance numbers, set changes, everything or anything that makes a musical a musical. I nicknamed these moments of significant interest, but for today let's just call them interesting moments. Each musical was analysed with this devised template analysis model in durational values of seconds, and secondly the number of bars that made up the musical. The scores utilised for the bar analysis were taken from the initial unaltered West End production, and the audio analysis was either taken from a live video recording of the musical or full symphonic audio recording, matching the scores utilised exactly. The model demonstrates 16 golden ratio points and was based on historical techniques undertaken by scholars such as Euclid, BC 300, Pacioli, 1509, and Da Vinci in 1487. The points are simply established by dividing the duration of the musical by 1.61803. This calculates the location of the initial golden ratio point. The golden ratio is then used to divide the duration between the beginning and the initial golden ratio point to create the subdivision, and so on, and so on, and so on. The same calculations are then worked out backwards to find the inverse. That provides new locations that are not seen in the original layout. So, to summarize, I had a model that maps golden ratio points onto a timeline. I had 3 categories of significant moments to look for. 1, plot and lyrics. 2, the music. And 3, the visual effects, all of which effectively make a musical what it is. Now, the needle in a haystack search began through 10 identified musicals, approximately 25 hours of recorded material, and over 50,000 bars of music. I needed a mighty big spreadsheet, and I got one. Now, before I demonstrate the Marley system, I'm taking this opportunity to show you how to analyze a musical with the system, primarily because the information I discovered helped to build the final model, and it is important to understand the primary principles before going off to write your own masterpiece. It seems appropriate at this point to talk about Les Miserables, not only because it was the first musical I analysed, but I had access to the original scores and the composer himself, Claude Michel Schoenberg. On the 15th of January 2015, myself and Jane Robertson, the lyricist for this project, went down south and met Claude Michel at his house in London. We interviewed him concerning all aspects of musical composition, and what became very evident was that he was a genius at his craft. He demonstrated that his powerful music was not just a pretty tune he had come up with. Like so many artists before him, years of research, practice and experience, along with a collaborative effort from all involved in his productions, created, whether you like it or not, a masterpiece of musical theatre. So, what did I find? The job was to analyse the 10 most successful commercial musicals and have us snoop around those little golden ratio points, calculated in seconds, and see what was happening. This information would then be collated and analysed across all the musicals to help inform a model of musical theatre structure design. So, late one night, after many hours of programming, extensive calculations in spreadsheets, and many corrected mistakes later, it was time to test the system and see what happened at the golden ratio points of Les Miserables. Here we see the 16 golden ratio points I utilised for the research. I've converted the calculations into a percentage scale so I can compare positioning throughout all the musicals. Now remember, musicals are all different lengths, so by using a percentage we can tell exactly what happens at the same point in each production, based on their duration. So, time for a look. Let's start with the actual golden ratio point of Les Miserables. What happens at 6,221 seconds into the production? That's 61.8%. Barricade is complete, closely followed by arguably one of the most well-known songs in musical theatre history, On My Own. Well, that was nice. Something important happened at the golden ratio point. We have a nice song, and we have a major change of plot, because the barricade completion signifies the beginning of the final section of the storyline, and additionally reintroduces the main theme of Les Mis in a variant form. So we have 3 significant elements hovering around the golden ratio point. Let's look at another. I randomly chose this one, Fantine, one of the main female characters. She dies. Let's just take a moment to remember dear Fantine. Now let's try another one. Valjean steals from a priest who was trying to save him, and then converts to Christianity. So what? Well, this is an important moment because this thrusts Valjean's storyline as the catalyst for the musical. Now one more for luck. Gavroche, dear Gavroche, he dies, the wee little boy. A very brave move to kill off a child in a musical. Now at this point, we're now probably looking about 3:15 in the morning. I started to wake up because there in front of me was appearing musical highlights from Les Miserables right on or within 1% away from the golden ratio points. Okay, I'd only calculated 4, but I was excited. So here's what the picture looked like 1 hour later. To cut a long evening short, a major piece of storyline from Les Miserables sat on every golden ratio point. 4 deaths, 1 marriage, prostitution, Christianity, robbery, and child slavery all highlighted or appearing at the golden ratio points. Now we understand why it's called Les Miserables. 2 important points have just made themselves evident to us. Firstly, the plot points listed in front of you all happen within 1% of the golden ratio point. And secondly, the themes of those plot points build up important elements of the storyline for this musical. Crucial elements, all happening bang on the golden ratio points. I was not expecting that. So I immediately plotted Phantom of the Opera into the same spreadsheet. I was now getting very excited. Now, just like Les Miserables, Phantom displayed the same pattern where crucial elements of storyline were happening at the golden ratio points. Obviously, the storylines are completely different, so we won't find a similarity between the two, and nor should we. It is important to point out that there are crucial plot points that do not appear at a golden ratio point. However, a pattern was still developing. The next stage was to analyse all the musicals in the same way and start collating what I found. Now, this is not as complicated as it might look. The plot element summary diagram summarises the plot element findings. This process identifies where the golden ratio points occur within the actual musical, and because a percentage is utilised, we can accurately see what is happening at the same moment in percentage time of all the musicals. The number at the top there represents the amount of elements identified at each golden ratio point. Below that is the percentage difference away from the golden ratio point to the element point. As you can see, most of the elements were less than 1% away from the golden ratio points, so we can at least build up a pattern demonstrating things happening at the same percentage of time within all the musicals. I catalogued the elements appearing at the golden ratio points and summarised them into one datasheet, which clearly shows the common reoccurring elements. This table summarises elements identified close to the golden ratio points of all the analysed musicals. Although interesting, I haven't attempted to analyse the reasoning why or how different elements appear. The important thing is to establish the type of element and where they appear, hence fueling the information for a model that can then be utilised to guide creatives when they're designing a new musical. The results suggest that the musicals conform to systems associated with storytelling, which is no surprise as most of the musicals analysed were based on famous pre-written novels. There are writing models available for short stories, film scripts, novels, and that's where I turn to for guidance on current trends in structure design. So I could catalogue the findings and then build, based on the findings, a model of construction for musicals. The element summary chart fueled a list of action points common to the 10 musicals at the golden ratio points. For example, you will see that the plot development is spread evenly throughout the duration of the musical. Each observation like that then came with a suggestion, and I emphasise just a suggestion, and on this occasion it was simply to spread the plot development throughout the full musical. Simple. They get a bit more complicated. In turn, I analysed each element and detailed the findings with a suggestion for the construction process. I finished with 19 suggestions of advice concerning plot placement and additionally music elements, which was then translated into the first version of the Marley System. To be able to utilise the findings accurately and advance the Marley System, I needed to do a practical test, analyse and then learn from that process, which in a nutshell meant I had to write a musical. The idea was to take the findings and mould a story around the current Marley framework, and then document the challenges, successes, the approach, and then the methods, which in turn feeds back to the Marley system, with practical advice regarding the how-to aspect. I'll give you one example of a complication you are faced with when you start this approach. You need to know the length of your musical before you begin, because the golden ratio spacing of the points are dependent on that length. Now, more on that later because it's quite important. As well as looking at the bigger picture of the musical, I did a little work on some songs from the shows to see if there was any alignment with the golden ratio on a much smaller scale, sort of a micro scale. Again, significant moments were mapped to the closest golden ratio point, and the percentage difference utilised as a marker to distinguish the proximity alignment. The symbol NA is utilised to distinguish where there is no element of interest, nothing out of the ordinary close to a golden ratio point. Now, the table was designed to easily see the main form and structures of 6 songs, each taken from the actual golden ratio point of the musical itself. Green shading means the element is within 1% of the golden ratio point, amber within 2%, and red is above 2%. The results detail one song has significant alignments, Empty Chairs and Empty Tables from Les Miserables. All the points analysed have a significant element within a deviation rule of less than 2%. Jesus Christ Superstar is the next best fit, followed by Waltz for Evita and Chi and American Dream. Past the Point of No Return from Phantom of the Opera displays 4 deviation problems, and finally Memory from Cats just breaks all rules. However, these results are to be expected at micro level. In fact, the surprise was to see such a close alignment with Empty Chairs and Empty Tables. Now I'm going to play you 2 examples. Firstly, Empty Chairs in its entirety. If you can see the system working in a small song, you should be able to visualize the system in its big brother, the full musical itself. You'll see on the screen a moving representation of time, and as the timer reaches a golden ratio point, the video emphasizes it. Listen to what happens at those points within the song. You'll hear changes to the music, and possibly an emotion might be sparked.
There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Empty chairs at empty tables. Now my friends are dead and gone. Here they talked of revolution. Here it was they lit the flame. Here they sang about tomorrow, and tomorrow never came. From the table in the corner, they could see a world reborn, and they rose with voices ringing, and I can hear them now, the very words that they had sung became their last communion. On the lonely barricade at dawn. Oh, my friends, forgive me that I live and you are gone. There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on. Phantom faces at the window, phantom shadows on the floor, empty chairs and empty tables where my friends will meet no more. Oh, my friends, don't ask me what your sacrifice was for. Empty chairs and empty tables sing no more.
So what you have just heard and seen are the interesting elements closest to the golden ratio in one song. Time doesn't favour me demonstrating this in a whole musical because we would be here for about 30 hours looking at interesting elements. However, just to show you a cracking example of what I'm talking about, even though the song itself does not align very well to the golden ratio, have a look at this. It's where you find the golden ratio point of a song happening at the same time, at the same golden ratio point of the musical.
Sunlight through the trees in summer, endless masquerading, like a flower as the dawn is breaking, the memory is fading. Untrained, it's so easy to leave me all alone with the memory of my days in the sun.
Moments like this keep popping up throughout the research, and that's why I label them as interesting elements. And Elaine certainly knows how to belt them out. Now, time to write a musical.
Whenever you walk down a New York street, be very careful to watch your feet. 'Cause strange things happen here when it rains. You gotta watch out for those darn dreams.
As faded sands, all she needs is love, a tender touch reaching from above. She'll often find a reason to turn all away. She needs to let love just stand in her way.
But it ain't necessarily something bad. Say, call me superstitious, call it a fad. But maybe it ain't about something bad.
So listen up, folks, you get out of the
There's
joke. Such a hush, no sound, no breath, no heartbeat. Then I breathe, I touch, my soul touches.
Round and round and round and round. Little things, those tiny things, and mighty things should be your preference. When they build a layer and layer, they really make a difference.
Tiny things, skinny things,
Fleeting things,
skinny things,
paltry things,
mighty things,
bigger things,
little
little things.
Twinkling, fading star, how I wonder where you are, shining bright up above the world so high, like a dime, like a diamond in the sky.
You interfere when our eyes met. Did lightning strike? Thunder screaming? Goes my heart beating?
So how did we get over the first hurdle of timing? The problem of duration and the utilization of the golden ratio model was considered by either A, choosing to write the musical to a non-adaptable fixed length, incorporating the golden ratio model into that compositional structure. If you do this, your piece will indeed fit the golden ratio exactly, as long as you stick to the maths. But to me as a composer, that seems very restrictive and that cage just a little bit too tight. Option B is to decide on a duration to aim for and allow for flexibility in the movement of the length. Now, to be true to the golden ratio, as the duration changed, your golden ratio points will change, so a fair amount of adaptation might be required during the process to make it fit exactly. And option C is to have no fixed duration, write the musical, and then adapt accordingly for the golden ratio model once it's completed. Now, this seems like a sensible option, but in my case, it was impossible. I already knew of the Marley system. It was already in my head. So without even a suggestion of duration at the outset might trigger a battle of conflict between what-ifs and actual during the writing process. Either of the three systems will work. However, the most interesting and appropriate approach for this research was to follow through with option B, an adjustable duration. This was set at 90 minutes and allowed me to utilize the Marley system as a guide, but not having to worry too much about where things should happen. The knowledge of knowing the system would automatically aim to place interesting elements in roughly the right places, and then shift and adapt at the end of the process once the actual time, the final duration, was known. Now, as I mentioned, we were lucky enough to meet Claude Michel Schoenberg, composer of Les Miserables, Miss Saigon and Martin Guerre, and he told us when he wrote musicals, he started from the beginning and went right the way through without stopping. He never had any music hidden away anywhere. The story inspired Claude's music from moment one, second one, to the very end, in order. So, that advice was to start from the beginning and work your way through to the end. Get the story right first. Upon reading the full short story of O. Henry's original Green Door and discussing the concept with Jane, we decided that this would make an appropriate framework for an extended piece which adhered to the original structure, however allowing us to add in a backstory that embellished the mystery, the romance and narrative appropriate for musical theatre treatment. The laid-back and seemingly uncomplicated storyline allowed me to encompass myself in what-if scenarios as a starting point for the restructuring of the plot. I wanted to explore characterization through music, accompanied by a strong storyline where music was unashamedly dominant and equally emotionally forceful. I wanted to achieve the same effect as Claude Michel and Lloyd Webber, a truly through-composed musical where songs blend into the musical background in a seamless way. So my starting point, prior to even thinking about the Marley system, was to go back to the classical form of sonata form. This is a harmonic and thematic system that is seen in compositions by Mozart, Beethoven, Scarlatti, to name but a few. However, I adjusted it to suit storyline development, because the music for TGD was going to emphasize the storyline. I didn't want to be restricted in the early stages by what a key a piece should be in or what theme I was using. I just needed to know a dramatic structure. So that's where we adapted the sonata form to match our own form. So we had drama form matching the harmonic form. It was used to influence us. Once we had an initial storyline, I then started to utilize the original Marley system to try and map areas of dramatic structure with relevance to timing, based on our 90-minute running time. The first draft looked like this, but takes the current main themes and spreads them out in a durational timeline. This allows us to see how much time is dedicated to various sections. I've added on the original sonata model so you can see a resemblance between the two systems. Constant discussion and revision was needed to manipulate the story into the format we felt was appropriate for what we were trying to achieve. The golden ratio model became a bonus tool at this stage. The map gave me a good idea of how long particular songs should be within sections of the musical. Obviously, storyline and lyrics were going to be the final indicator, but having this direction was definitely a bonus compared to the way I would work before. In the past, the only map I might have would be a plot line or no particular attention taken to the durations and where the plot should be or where it should appear. It was like working blind. The new tool gave me a structure in the compositional process. Here we see the first full plot version of our musicals incorporated into the Marley system. I know it's a small diagram on here, but the text is irrelevant. Don't worry about what it says, unless you really want to know about the musical plotline that did not make it to the stage. It's the ability to see your plotline in conjunction with the golden ratio that's important. Now, musicals are subject to change, and that's exactly what happened with The Green Door. Quite often, myself or Jane would come up with another new concept or idea, and this was then slotted into the new timeline. Plot version 1 was our first draft, fully adapted story from the O. Henry original. Here we see the two different versions side by side, and I've highlighted where we made changes, quite substantial changes, but the thrust of the piece still matches the Marley system and the locations. Plot version 3 was the final version. This was the printed script and score that we rehearsed with the students. Our rehearsal process was always going to be a workshop approach because we wanted to firstly let the students have the very unique experience of working on something completely brand new, and secondly, make sure our storyline was appropriate, intriguing, and interesting to the audience. Through this workshop process, along with movement specialists, song adaptations, additional lyrics, the musical becomes a living, breathing thing. There is lots of new input from many creatives, and it's very important for everyone involved to understand that they're working on the production together for the benefit of the show. The Green Door premiered at the Air Gaiety Theatre in January 2015, where it received a very warm welcome from its audience. Here's a little clip from the end of the show and a few audience comments received from the final night's performance.
Hey there, you two. Feeling better?
Why did you send me looking for a green door?
What?
What, you gave me this. Why did you choose me? Why here? Why today?
Hey man, I just hand out the cards. I don't decide who gets them. Besides, it's just a show. Over there, at the theater. The Green Door. It's just a play.
Just a play?
Well, whatever the reason, I'm glad you took the chance.
Well, Helen, it's time to go.
Yeah, I suppose we should.
You would have thought it, huh?
I know. You play piano, I play piano,
And we both lived at different sides of New York.
and never knew. But then we met.
Because of this. The Green Door.
It was obvious that we had written a show that certainly entertained our audience, and that was great. But did it achieve the objective of hitting the golden ratio points as planned in all of the early versions? How far out was I with those plot points, musical elements, and the special effects? It's difficult to work out exactly how far you are off until you have a reliable recorded version of the show at the pace you want it to be. So I had to wait until the final video edit was completed for the calculations. The plot planned versus plot actual diagram demonstrates 7 near identical matches, 4 between 1 and 2% approximations, and 4 above 2%. However, the interesting thing is that everything above 2% was only out by less than 3%. So we had a fairly good representation of a musical and the system, the Marley System, that did allow you to construct in a real-time format using the golden ratio. The next stage would be to adjust the points so an exact match occurs, but I haven't done that yet. Myself and Jane always intended to rewrite the Green Door and adapt aspects that we were not happy with. That process is starting now. And as soon as the new storyline is completed, I will then rescore the musical and make the appropriate changes to have a musical that will exactly fit the golden ratio. In the meantime, I've started a new project inspired by the lockdown, where I'm writing the score to a Scottish fantasia, a piece of music based on modern-day fairy tales created by members of the Merchant Voices Choir in Glasgow. This was a lockdown project I created whilst the choir rehearsed online for 18 months. Once the lyrics are complete, the same process will be applied to this concert piece of music, and the Marley System will be utilised for a different type, a different genre, a different experience. Here's a sneak preview at what's to come. So, how many of the 19 interesting elements did I utilise in the Green Door at the golden ratio point? The answer is all of them, some more than others, and this diagram demonstrates where they were used in relation to the golden ratio points. It's also important to mention the symmetrical aspect of utilising the golden ratio for a construction method. The Marley system utilises the inverse of the golden ratio, so exact symmetrical points in the duration are evident. Would it surprise you to find that in Les Miserables, Valjean's rebirth story starts at GR-5 and his death occurs at the symmetrical point of IGR-E? Fantine's death is the symmetrical opposite of Gavroche's death. At IGR plus B, we meet Eponine for the first time, and its exact symmetrical opposite, Eponine dies. Likewise, in Phantom of the Opera, when Christine appears on the stage for the first time at GR-3, it is mirrored towards the end of the production where Christine stars in the Phantom's Opera, GR+1, on the stage. Plot elements like this appear throughout the 10 analysed musicals, but not with any consistency. You can see in the Green Door chart the areas of shaded colour demonstrate symmetry. For instance, the first GR point we see Samuel start telling us his story. At the symmetrically opposite point, Samuel concludes his summary of the story. When we first meet the landlady, her last farewell scene is mirrored at the symmetrical point, and so on and so on. So where does all this take us? Back to the Marley system where we started so long ago. But now we have the new and improved version. This takes all the relevant information researched through analysis and rebuilds the model, demonstrating a time-based golden ratio tool that delivers a dramatic structure at the relevant real-time golden ratio points. I also did away with the original naming of the golden ratio points, IGR minus D. It was very complicated, and so we simplified that down to GR1, 2, 3. To make the calculations easier for myself and anyone who wants to have a go, I developed a simple golden ratio calculator spreadsheet that does all the hard work for you. You simply input the duration you're working with into the relevant box, and all the Marley system golden ratio point timings will appear in the correct moment in time. The rest is up to you. I've even added a guideline for what you could do with your important elements and potentially how they should be treated based on the research and analysis of the original commercial musicals. Whether it helps you as a composer, a constructor, director or producer, who knows? I'd be interested to hear if you try it. But one thing is certain, in all of the commercial musicals analysed, the golden ratio was never knowingly utilised in the construction of those musicals. All of what you have seen analysed in the commercial musicals was done by the writers with no working knowledge of the golden ratio. Cook and Hambridge agonised in their research to find links between aesthetic beauty and the golden ratio. After 7 years of work in this field of study, I now believe the aesthetic link exists not just in the final artifact of a creation, but primarily through the process of creation. The nurturing of ideas, the reflective process, the discovery of common elements and experiential, tacit and haptic knowledge combined to create an aesthetic process that can only benefit the artifact. You can use the Marley system to create your own time-based durational piece of art, whether it be a musical, a play, a film, etc. But at the end of the day, to coin a phrase from a certain musical, the system will not make your show into a hit. You need all the other elements to come together perfectly, at the right moment in time, in the right theatre, in the right country, and most importantly, with the right story. The interest in the Marley system has been quite extensive over the last year, with articles appearing in the Sunday Times, the Sunday Mirror, Daily Express, the Daily Star, MSN News, Yahoo News, and even the Canadian Inquirer. I was even interviewed by Paul Ross on his live radio broadcast, but I must emphasize, this is not a quick way to success. The Marley system is another tool that can be used to help you construct a musical, knowing that you are utilizing the golden ratio within that process. My next step forward for this research is to experiment with it in opera and film, but also see if it has other uses outside of the entertainment world, for instance in sports, where timing is crucial to winning. Now, I hope you found this summary of my research at the very least interesting. There's an awful lot more to tell, and I'm happy to do so privately. But for now, if you have any questions, just send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And thank you very much for listening. See you soon. Bye.
I see so much of me in that worried face, spending time thinking, is there life beyond this place? Looking for that someone who will fit the space. Is my heart really